come on over here and I'll fill you in on how the Church of Scientology works. You see, Stan, Scientology was founded by a great man named L. Ron Hubbard.
Oh my God, it's John Travolta!
Is this where he lives? Is this where L. Ron Hubbard is? Oh my God!
Yes, John Travolta and Tom Cruise are big Scientologists. Do you believe me now? Your son deserves to be enlightened. Stan, do you want to hear the great secret doctrine of life behind Scientology?
Sure.
All right, go ahead and tell him.
Okay, I'll try. I just wish I could write my room, but Tom Cruise won't come out of the closet.
Bonjour. Hey everyone, I have a great guest with us today, Scott Gordon of the One Great Work Network, which Leslie is also a part of, and unfortunately she's under the weather, but Scott has so much, charisma and knowledge and everything. He's going to hold it down long and strong for a really interesting and surprisingly insightful discussion today regarding Scientology and some solutions that we can build around that, the teachings of it, realizing some of the constraints or controversy and all that jazz. But without further ado, Scott Gordon, how you doing? You're a musician. Buenos dias in Buenos Aires, Argentina, broadcasting live, brother. How you doing?
Well, thank you. I'm doing great, thanks. I've been a musician. I've been a singer-songwriter and play keyboards, pianos, guitars. Not really active too much lately on that. Been very busy with research and activism, things like that. But really good to be on the show here today.
Right on, Scott. Yeah, so, you know why we're here. And just a quick little background, because growing up I actually saw a whole line of book series of L. Ron Hubbard and was always kind of fascinated by that. I never really cracked the covers of those. They always kind of threw me off because it was that one series, like I think it was Invaders, with the hand with the little spike bracelet with holding the globe and this and that. I was kind of like, whoa, is this some kind of like horror series or what's going on with that? But lo and behold, he's like almost like, if you look at his youth growing up, as far as like the picture painted perfectly in America of someone excelling at anything he does, like one of the youngest Boy Scout, Eagle Scouts and this and that, and flying glider planes and being in a war, writing so many books and literature and magazines. It's mind-blowing. In like the eclectic background he's had and going to or like China and places like that. And I mean, a gazillion times more than I do, but 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 what an enigma, as you said earlier, right?
Yeah, he was a larger-than-life character, and he loved to tell stories about it. Not all the stories were probably true. However, because he did a lot of covert operations and intelligence, I think he gave himself license to tell stories where, he's not revealing things he's not supposed to reveal, but he still gets the same kind of adventure across. And I'm sure he spun some yarns as well. He was a fiction writer, a science fiction writer, and so there's a lot of fiction in what he used to tell people.
Wow. Yeah. And you were saying that, he's a dichotomy or something like that. He's got a brilliant side and kind of a dark side. And what spawned out of his teachings and all that. And I guess people want to quickly... This is why we want to have you on our show, because so many people are quick to label certain things they don't fully understand as something dogmatic, a cult, and yes, it's been labeled as a religion, kind of maybe arguably more correctly than the former or the latter. But what would you be able to tell people to be like, hey, man, this is the deal on Scientology. There might be, this, perspective of it, and these things might be true, but there's, not just a cookie cutter thing to it, in a sense. Not always, I guess.
Yeah, well, people would be very surprised, probably given, the recent book and movie that's come out about Going Clear and the Leah Remini series. Some of the things that we didn't know back in the days when I was on staff, for example, in the Scientology organization, are coming out, that not all of what the church proclaims in their biography is true. He was sort of elevated to sort of a god status. And that's what I was indoctrinated with while I was in the organization. But here, there's a lot we can get into here, but I'm just going to tell your viewers that the reason that you may find this interesting is there's going to be a lot more connections to, for example, the New World Order, the men that run this planet, the intelligence agencies at work. All of this plays a role in Scientology. And I think by the end of the show, I'd like to talk about how this organization actually, in a nutshell, became a collector of alternative people with alternative views, the kind of people who wouldn't go to church, for example. Science fiction readers, engineers, agnostics that really wouldn't collect under a church, and that they wanted to bring, you might say, under one tent. So you could have everybody there to be observed, watched. If you want to have a real, overview of it, Hubbard accomplished that in many ways. He got a lot of people involved in Dianetics and Scientology. And there's something to it. And if there weren't something to it, there wouldn't have been so many intelligent people involved. And that's why I got involved. And I found some things in it that are available nowhere else. Hubbard had a deep understanding of the occult. And a lot of people may not realize that don't know about the occult, which just means hidden, things that are hidden from our view and our awareness by the education system and the news media. A lot of it has to do with psychology. And Hubbard's movement was an alternative psychology movement. It came from the same source originally, but it actually built on and pioneered new things that we got to credit to Hubbard's just intense interest in trying to understand his own mind, because he was an incredibly intelligent person who had signed up, or at a very young age, into the intelligence agency network. And he had his own trauma and stuff to deal with. And he didn't get that dealt with in the first years. There was a lot of play acting. And a lot of people don't realize, they think Hubbard got all this, we call it auditing, getting your therapy in this Dianetics or Scientology. And he had some pretty huge issues from his military experience, his spy experience, being an intelligence officer, a very high level one. For those of you who know already, Aleister Crowley was a top intelligence agent for the British network. And there's even some indications that Hubbard mentored directly with Crowley in the 30s, but we don't have evidence of that. We just know there are periods of time, sort of like the story of Jesus Christ. There's periods of time you can't account for. What was he doing? And Hubbard did that in his 20s, which were the 1930s.
Interesting.
And Crowley also had come back from Italy for a period of time before he went back into Germany. Crowley was all over World War I and setting up the what the elites wanted set up for World War II. So Crowley was in Italy as Mussolini was helped to come to power. And then Crowley was in Germany working with the secret societies there who were setting up the Nazi network, because they had both an above ground network of your Nazi politics, but they also had a secret society network where they were working with the dark occult. So Crowley was all over that, and because he was a dark occultist himself, he was able to gather intelligence from the occult groups in Germany before World War II.
Oh, wow.
Now, I think it's possible that when Crowley returned from all that, that he mentored L. Ron Hubbard, who has a very remarkably similar life. And that life is this. You are one of our top intelligence men. You go out there and do your thing and report back to us, and we will back you up. You'll have the backup you need so that you can get it off the ground. And that is your cover. Your cover is that you're going to be a wacky religious leader. And you can see that Crowley had a cover. I mean, wickedest man on earth, and all the pictures of his rituals and things like that, and his weird Egyptian stuff. And then you have Hubbard, captain of the ship in Scientology. So you have a remarkably similar intelligence cover going here. And the only thing that I can't confirm or tell is that at what point L. Ron Hubbard went rogue from his masters and actually put in a very workable inner work or therapy that would help somebody recover themselves to be self-determined enough that you couldn't be governed. Okay?
Self-sovereign,
so Hubbard had this dual agenda where he was working for people who wanted to govern and control humanity, and also he had a technique that could actually free people with inner work from their own personal demons and their own traumas to become ungovernable. So that was a very tough act for him to juggle. And when you really study Scientology deeply, you'll find indications of both and how he was actually accomplishing both, all at the same time.
Wow. And so he's written umpteen hundred works, books, magazines, and all that. It's hard to wrap your mind around that stuff sometimes. And how much was encrypted into certain layman's just like magazines, if he's slipping in little things allegorically or whatever. It's really interesting to almost like fantasize about. He seems like a mythological creature almost, like today, like there's like this lore about him, kind of like Crowley as well. And it's really fascinating, the connections of both of them with the ties with the world wars and secret societies and all that. That's really interesting. And sometimes people get triggered hearing like, secret societies, and thinking they got an oversimplistic idea about it. But like those things are secret yet not secret a lot of times. And there's a lot of them have stemmed like in Bavaria, the fraternities over there through schools and all that. Adam Weishaupt for one of a bunch. But so yeah. Going down the grades or the gambit, right? You have ultra secret, occult, or and then not so secret, kind of in between worlds, and then you have just like out in the open. Hey, we're kind of acting like a secret society, but we're just like, hey, everyone knows about us. Almost kind of like Scientology in a sense, right? So it's kind of interesting how Hubbard flipped the script on that a little bit, I guess. And and by the way, I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I had a bunch of his great grandson, Jamie DeWolf, is a really interesting character. He runs just like a bunch of stuff, but he used to host Tourette's Without Regrets. It's like a slam poetry and like hip hop, battle raps, and like a whole bunch of variety stuff that's just like, from the 90s glory days of just like, street art and that kind of stuff. But and he would joke around like saying like, yeah, I'm L. Ron Hubbard's grandson, and just like have fun with it, make a joke about it, kind of demystify it a little bit. But he got a lot of flack for it, I think so too. Like
he does a whole routine, and if you want to do a search on YouTube, he's got a video where he does a whole long monologue telling the story, his story, because he's his great grandson, yes, and his grandfather was L. Ron Hubbard's youngest or firstborn son, and worked with Hubbard all through the 1950s. He left at the end of 1959, and he became persona non grata around other Scientologists because Hubbard felt betrayed that his son had left, and his son felt betrayed that Hubbard had kept him working at a rate that he wasn't able to support his family. So that's why he left in the end. And then he became a whistleblower against his father, and that resulted in a huge war. And Hubbard had his own little intelligence network called the Guardian's Office.
Wow.
And so with his own son, was terrified of the harassment that was going on, being basically ordered by his father, spying on him, sending messages, planting the idea that his children were in danger. And like, this is L. Ron Hubbard's grandkids, you would think.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it became an extreme family issue, and Jamie goes into that. I have not met him personally. I was in the same event in 2014. They had an event in Clearwater, right in the heart of the Scientology empire. And I was there for the first day, but I didn't get a chance to stick around for Jamie's presentation, which was riveting, because he was reading from his grandfather's diary in a 1952 hotel where Hubbard was giving one of his most famous lectures, the Philadelphia lectures. And a lot of people don't realize that Hubbard was taking Crowley's work and making it more understandable through those lectures. So Hubbard had a profound knowledge of the occult and of Crowley's work, and considered that he was continuing Crowley's work, although he didn't tell people that. Other than in the opening lecture of that series, if you can get to the opening December 1st lecture of the Philadelphia lectures, are famous amongst Scientologists, he says, "My friend Aleister Crowley." So he does acknowledge that he knew him, and probably not just at a distance. And for those who want to go further down that rabbit hole, there's a character out there, a really intelligent person who worked for Colonel Michael Aquino. He's famous for being in the Bay Area, a military colonel who was in the Church of Set, and before that, the Church of Satan, and was instrumental in getting Satanism accepted in the military. And wow, that's another. These are all huge rabbit holes that we could spend an entire show on each one.
Sure,
but
yeah, man.
Douglas Dietrich destroyed a lot of documents for the Navy. He had to shred documents. He read them before he shred them. Damn. And he claims that he saw plenty of documents where Aleister Crowley was mentoring L. Ron Hubbard in England in probably the late 30s. This is before World War II, in between the two world wars.
Yeah, wow. Interesting.
Yeah.
So to bring it to modern times, when you're talking to a newbie. Just wanted to say that because it's a funny word, and I'm in France, so they don't say that around here, and I'm sure they don't say that over there. Que onda? What's up, man? But do they say that at least? Like in Mexico?
What's up, man?
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
What would you say to someone that's just like highly skeptical and has nothing but negative things about Scientology? Because what they've heard is just like the Tom Cruise scandals and what's that woman? Leah
Remini. Uh-huh.
Yeah. Like crashing his wedding or some shit like that, and just like trying to expose the Scientology, and like she's going after what it seems to be the Miscavige, exoteric, this domineering Scientology sect, or side of some of the other teachings that old Elron was trying to also speak through his writings and all that, right, in lectures. I could be wrong. I don't know. I'm possibly.
Yeah. All I would say is hopefully most of your viewers are familiar with controlled opposition. And just to quote the master of that, Lenin from the Communist Party in Russia, basically said if you want to, you have to control both sides if you want to make things come out the way you want them to. So he's just expressing something that's been going on for eons, since the dawn of time, and that is that the elites have learned very quickly that you have to get your people in on both sides. So the Leah Remini show and the anti-Scientology is a controlled opposition, and it's very controlled, and we have proof of that.
Oh, wow. Huh.
And of course, Scientology itself is very controlled. And in turn, if you want to go back in time, Scientology was a controlled opposition to psychology and psychiatry itself. Okay? It was for the people who were afraid to go into doctors and didn't want to talk to psychiatrists, you could get them into Scientology. Okay?
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
So when you look at the controlled opposition nature of this, now, the other thing is, a lot of that negative information is true. It's usually taken out of context, and it's always said without talking about any of the positives. So what I would say to people is, don't trust me, do your own research. But why am I still working with Scientology? Because there are things in it that are extremely workable, that you can't get anywhere else, and my project Free Scientology is actually to extract that from the authoritarian organization so that anybody can use it freely. And so what I would say is that Scientology was used as a kooky religious cult to sequester some valuable stuff, some of it derived from occult psychology that was very workable, and to keep it sequestered from the rest of humanity. So you had to mortgage your house, give over your life savings if you wanted to do the full range of inner work in Scientology. Okay? So they had everybody there collected in the little pen called Scientology. And yes, they still interact with the world at large, but in a very limited basis. The cult finds out if you're talking too much to people who are anti-Scientology or have different ideas or different histories, so you're sequestered into a cult. And so that keeps the information secret and people paying for it. And so you have that knowledge differential that Mark Passio teaches and talks about.
Right.
You have the knowledge there, and you have the people who don't know and who will never know because they're afraid to approach that information because it's either surrounded by a cult or it's surrounded in the controversy that goes with the cult. So you have your independent Scientologists out of the church who are fighting the battles of, people's ideas of it that have been shaped by media, and most media has been negative against Scientology, or is, characterized or spotlighted Tom Cruise's special insanities, jumping on the couch and all the you have John Travolta, but he's not very vocal either way. He hasn't participated in it for a long time.
Yeah, right.
He's pretty respected, but he has his side. He has his stories that he's had to, overcome. So you have people who have been successful with using Scientology, a lot of the actors and actresses, but then they get caught up in some of the drama and the power of Scientology itself. And so I can't defend them, but I can say that they're sincere when they tell you that they've been helped by the subject. They won't tell you that they're in a trap now, and I'm glad to say that I got out of the trap, and I'm trying to make it. I will grant, accolades to those who continue to blow the whistle. I wasn't high up on the organization chain. I was locally on a local basis, but I didn't join the Sea organization or get to the top of the international management. So my story isn't as interesting or as powerful as all of those. However, I did have an inside viewpoint. I did get out to the international headquarters and got to see some things that a lot of ordinary staff members didn't, because I was a member of the Office of Special Affairs, which is Scientology's intelligence wing, and I got taught all of the intelligence material that Hubbard made into secret bulletins, so that his organization would have that power and ability to manage situations that were threatening to the organization in ways not too dissimilar from a good mafia or from the big mafia. The government, uses its intelligence organizations to do. You learn how to do legal actions. You learn how to gather intelligence. You learn how to do public relations and media so that you can either cover for what's going on, or you can present, and promote the good part of what you're doing, which I was basically, being in a local organization, I was basically like a white hat. And you can't have an organization that gets away with the crimes that Scientology got away with without having a lot of white hats, so that you can point to these guys who are doing good things, good community activities. It's sort of like the Freemasons with their children's hospitals, and then you don't know what they do at night, and you probably don't want to know if you don't. But it's sort of the same situation where you have a dark side of the organization and you have the front. And you have actually some genuinely good community activities going on. For example, there's a big literacy center in downtown Los Angeles that is helping a lot of kids learn to read. And you can't deny that's going on or that it's working, because there's a lot of the community who will tell you that they're benefiting from that. Mm-hmm. Just like the same thing with the Freemason Children's Hospital. It's a good thing. A lot of kids' lives are being saved and helped. So
the carrot
you have this mix that's very hard to navigate because it's very confusing. You have the good and the bad going on at the same time.
Yeah, and that's why they make themselves so ambiguous or whatever sometimes. And
right. It's the concept, really, when it comes down to it philosophically. It's the concept of the parasite. The parasite can never grow too big or it'll kill its host. It's got to have a healthy host. And so in our society, the people who produce and do the work are the host, and they have to have certain freedoms, or you're not going to have a robust economy to rob taxes from. And it's the same thing in the microcosm of Scientology. You've got to have participants who are doing well, who are learning about life, and who are getting inner work processing in their sessions where they're coming out and doing better in life. Like,
right, they need results. They're paying into this. It's
Yeah.
a pay-to-play type of thing, right? You know, it's
Exactly.
It doesn't have such a complex organization, you know, for fucking free for everyone, right? So yeah,
Yeah.
I get that,
So-
but yeah,
When you do have the dark characters that rise to the top of these organizations, they can only pull so much out of it. And sometimes they go too far, and sometimes they're just brilliant and they keep going and keep going, you know, for a long time. And, you know, it's like Henry Kissinger reaches 100 years old after doing so much evil for so long.
Okay, cool. Your audio
And we
cut
have
out for
our
a
Henry
second there.
Kissinger inside Scientology. We have our. I was talking about Henry Kissinger being you know, living to the age of 100. You know, it doesn't seem fair. He was a very evil character, and we have our own Henry Kissinger inside our microcosm Scientology, which is a microcosm of society. It's a closed cult. It's a closed cult group. And we have our own David Miscavige, who is a thief and a criminal, but at the same time, he knows Scientology from the bottom to the top, the good and the bad. And he's extremely brilliant at managing it for the ruling class.
Yeah, it's interesting. And yeah, for me, what hearing just some vague stories growing up and this and that, thinking like, oh, it just seems like another like pyramid scheme. Like, oh, they're trying to sell some knowledge to you know, sell hopes and dreams to people that could be useful idiots, almost in a sense. Even though that, yeah, of course, there's going to be some kind of hook line to sink people into that material or that club or whatever. Just like a lot of things. But what would you say about? And that's nothing against that. It's just, you know, an outsider's perspective that doesn't really understand those things from, you know, the top to the bottom, or even just, you know, a good preview of it. But what's your idea? What's your perspective on the whole pyramid scheme within the Scientology ranks and all that stuff?
Well, there's been accusations that it's a pyramid scheme, and it's not too dissimilar from the Freemasonry organization where you were talking about you get things out of it, you learn some things. There's a lot of knowledge in Freemasonry, for example, and you go up these levels.
The degrees,
It's kind of similar to that. And there's some genuine information and genuine value in there. I wouldn't recommend anybody join the organization, either one of those. But I would recommend getting some of the knowledge that you can get out of it. You know, I'm not sure I answered your question fully. Would you please repeat it? Because I just answered, I think, a part of it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm just...
We're talking about an outsider view of...
Right, the skepticism amongst Scientology being like just another pyramid scheme type of thing.
Okay, the pyramid scheme, I thank you.
Right.
Yeah, the skepticism is warranted. Be very careful around this. It's not... It's been accused of being a pyramid scheme, but strictly speaking, it's really not. I mean, there's one aspect of it where you bring people in and you get sort of a commission for the services that they do, but it's not a pyramid commission. In other words, you're not a grandfather of the people they bring in. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, and
So
I think
strictly speaking, not that type of pyramid scheme, but there are incentives for people to recruit. So in that sense, yes.
I threw that out loosely, and actually, a more better question is more or less, you know, like the hierarchical, you know, structure. Is it like a pyramid within the
Yes.
Scientology?
In that sense, it is, and that could lead into, you know, talking about organization and how it works, because Hubbard came up with a brilliant idea, and that's an organization board. It can be structured like a pyramid, which would be an authoritarian board, and it was in most of Scientology. However, the main heart of his design was to be a communication board. And he did say in his lectures about this that the idea was that people really didn't need orders or authority. If you had a good organization board and everybody knew their job and who to communicate to for what job, that you could actually run an organization without a leader or without authority.
Kind of like everyone knows their roles and they're autonomous within that role?
Yes. And so when people get this shock about, oh, what will we do without government, right? I want to tell you that you can derive this from the same idea. You can create a voluntary organization without much leadership. And the leadership would be a leadership of service, a coordinator, someone who coordinates and puts people in communication in different jobs or different parts of this organization. For example, people go, who's going to take care of the roads? Well, if you can crowdfund what you need to do to take care of the roads, then you can lay out an organization board and say, whose job is it to do this, and make light work. Many hands make light work. And everybody spends a few hours a month and the roads get taken care of, okay, if the organization board was done right. Now, the sister idea to the organization board is that every job has not just a description, but a full packet of information needed to perform that job. In other words, a manual. So if everybody has their manual and knows what to do, they don't need orders. Okay? So this opens the door to a discussion of how to make a group like Scientology is doing a very valuable thing, doing the inner work that we'll talk about later, what that is, if you want to know. And how we make that so that we don't need an authority or we don't need a cult to make all that happen. So that's the microcosm. The macrocosm is how could we apply it to a society? How could we get people where we didn't have to tax and really actually have people drafted into this involuntary organization called a nation, run by a government, and nobody got to say, well, people say, well, you get to vote, but you just get to vote on who's in charge of that authority structure. You don't get to vote whether you pay taxes or not, or whether you register for this or that. So what's a truly voluntary organization is a question we want to ask. And how would you run such a thing? Well, what I can tell you is that I think there are some pretty good solutions in the Scientology knowledge base where philosophically you can see what is going to be needed in almost any organization. And I've made up a chart for that so that people can see it's basically a one size fits all. You would have to specialize your activity and derive it from that organization board, but it's kind of like a generic organization board that should fit most situations. It'll even fit a family. For example, a family may have divisions of labor. Whose job is it to do the dishes, to make the food? Whose job is it to bring home the money? Whose job is it to maintain the cars? All those things can fit on the organization board. So you can have as little as 2 people in an organization, and you see all the functions that you do. And so Scientology taught me a lot about that, and I'll relate a personal experience. Once we were accustomed to having a executive director of our organization. But she went off to training for a month, and then when she came back, she was sick for a month. So for about 2 or 3 months, we operated as an organization without almost any orders or almost any authority. And there were almost no hitches. So I personally got to witness that when people know what their job is and they are used to coordinating, we continue to service people in all of their services. We were actually moving to a new location. So we continued to make progress on that without needing any orders, any boss, any authority. And you can only do that when everybody agrees on whose job is what. Everybody agrees on the policies of the organization, which you can come up with democratically. Mm-hmm. And then you don't need force or enforcement or involuntary organization, any of that. So it's very real to me from my experience in Scientology that you can come up with solutions that are non-authoritarian, that actually get things done and get the same type of product that you would expect from a president of a corporation that has a pyramid authority that we're used to, that we've been indoctrinated for thousands of years, literally, our ancestors, into this mindset that you have to have a boss and you have to have people under the boss and they have to have people under them. That we don't know any different. But when we talk about the fact that they don't have the right to do that, we have the right to be free, and yet we're still going to need to organize, that there are solutions to that. And I think Hubbard was brilliant in coming up with a solution. He wanted his organization to run and become successful, and it did. Off of slave labor practically, getting a $50 a week allowance and working 90-hour work weeks. So
damn.
I worked 90-hour work weeks. I didn't work in the Sea Organization, but in order to work both on staff and to pay my child support, I was a school teacher by day, and by evening and weekend, I had a full schedule. I literally worked sometimes 90 hours a week.
That's insane. Holy smokes, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, it takes a lot of dedication. And, I really like those aspects of just everyone being on the same page, everyone knowing what to do, but also being able to know what to do in replacing someone else, because I've worked in restaurants for over a dozen years and I've wanted to open up my own, but I also wanted to kind of change up the the chain of command, I guess, or all these things that put people superior than others and this and that. I've had some great experiences out here in France where even like the owner, I'm like working behind the bar with him and he's like doing the dishes while I'm doing drinks or that something like that. And so like everyone getting their hands dirty and just like being on the same level. It's not about like, oh, who owns the land or who owns the bar, or who owns the restaurant, who owns the hotel or the building, whatever, right? So I find that really interesting. And it is a paradigm shift to the systems that we've been so used to, and also just a lot of people going through life very passively, not taking like or having more responsibility or welcoming into like a bigger responsibilities, because like there's all this, especially in America, they're like, know your role and that's all you got to do and all that stuff. And that was a bad example, but you know what I mean a little bit, or
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Sorry.
Sure. Anything else, anything less is own nothing and be happy, quote unquote.
Oh, geez.
This idea that we're going into a paradigm shift into the future is own more and be happier. And we really got to move into everybody who's in the company should own part of the company, right? And it's not communism at all. It's actually ownership, and it's not ownership that's concentrated, but it's ownership. You have a stake in the company. And we've already had that being tried out. And ironically, it was the Nazis, even you would say the right-wing Nazis, who are the old school, let's not change anything, keep everybody slaves. that fought against it, but a lot of corporations, before they went woke, the modern way, experimented with worker-owned cooperatives and worker-owned companies. Those are not communist. Those are very capitalist. Or I should say, maybe they're not even capitalist, but they're the right synthesis we need to accomplish freedom for the individual and organization for the group. Because let's face it, we are a collective society, and we do need to work together. And cooperation is the divine feminine side of our humanity, and individual strength is the divine masculine. And in order to marry those, we have to come up with those solutions that synthesize the positive elements of each side and solve the problem of how do we eliminate authoritarian regimes and tyrannies and live together in peace as humanity and have the collective benefit, but at the same time the individual rights and the individual incentives to become who you are, to become more powerful than the next guy, but it's no big deal because the next guy has his own thing going, And we don't have experience as human beings on this planet over hundreds and thousands of years of not very much of it. Native Americans had their freedom before, the influx of immigration from Europe. And so there are periods of time in which humanity enjoyed more or less a good degree of freedom, but not a lot of the benefits of technology used for the right purposes and organization used to make the work lighter and the returns better. So I think there's a lot of potential, and I can't credit Scientology with all of these ideas that I have. I've read Larkin Rose about, the elimination of authority that is not natural to, and is the reason for our wars and our insanities and our cultures.
Was that in his book, The Most Dangerous Superstition?
Thank you. I forgot the title for a moment.
Oh, yeah.
The most dangerous superstition is the belief in authority and the belief in government. And it causes the pain and heartache that we experience in trying to live together in a huge human race. And so a lot of these ideas, some of them are from me, I've thought of them, others I've drawn from other sources, and a few, like the organization chart that I talked about earlier, comes from L. Ron Hubbard and his application, successful in Scientology, of how to get people cooperating and feeling good about it such that they didn't need a lot of pay to feel motivated. Because when you really are in a cooperative group, it's like being on a sports team. You forget about the pay. You have your returns in the group itself. And a lot of people might have a hard time imagining that unless you've been on a good sports team. And they don't pay athletes in amateur sports. Yeah, so, you're motivated to work out, to practice, and that should stay into adulthood. It shouldn't just be a thing of high school people and college people. It should be, this is how things should work. People should work on teams, and everybody knows their position, their job on the football team. My job is to guard the quarterback. My job is to catch the ball. So you have these different jobs, and it makes the team work together. So anyway, there's a lot of good things that could be done, but we're looking at hundreds of years, thousands of years of indoctrination otherwise.
Yeah, and a lot of embedded
small-minded slaves.
Sorry, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately. And there's, the psychological embedded tribalness of people, and once we have teams, and then there's another team, and that's it can lead to certain division or just, even animosity or negative sides of competition, or just like a discord in the proper cooperation that you're talking about. I mean, I really like that those ideas that you bring up. And I had a couple things I wanted to mention, and I totally forgot. But yeah, I'll let you. Oh yeah, so what's the deal with Dianetics, man? When someone who has no idea might just be like, Dietnetics? Like, are they talking about like something about the energy in diet or something like that? Like,
All right. Well, Hubbard
in a
had
nutshell, like just like 1 minute, man. Like, we can give videos on that shit. I just wanted to know your, quick elevator pitch.
well, to remind people, Dianetics is the red book with the volcano on the cover, and it promises you the modern science of mental health, and it does give people a kind of a manual for how to get with one other person and trade off do-it-yourself therapy. So the Dianetics movement of 1950 and for the first years of the 1950s was huge. Had a lot of famous people involved in it, trying it out. A lot of people read the book in that era, and ever since have been continuing to read the book. It hit the bestseller lists again in the 80s, and from time to time.
Damn.
So, and there were a lot of people remember the commercials with the volcano in the 1980s if they watched TV back then. And so Dianetics is a huge movement, and Dianetics just literally means dia, through the mind. Okay. Others have commented that Hubbard named his daughter Diana, but that happened after he named it Dianetics, so it's interesting. One of the most the hardcore theories I've heard, which I don't put a lot of into, was DIA, Defense Intelligence Agency, as a nod to the fact that it was all along a sort of a deep state project. So a lot of Scientologists will be put off by that if they're new to that idea. Hubbard claims that he resigned from naval intelligence, and yet we learn later that you do not resign from intelligence, and you don't get to shed your obligations for the rest of your life. And if you study William Cooper and the book Behold the Pale Horse, a very powerful book, he was naval intelligence, as Hubbard was, and you don't get into naval intelligence unless you have some connection to Freemasonry. In other words, they want people who have taken the drastic Freemason promise and oath to their fellow Freemasons. They will never break ranks. They will never betray the secrets of their fellow Masons. That is a second line of insurance for intelligence agencies to have not just the laws of the land, and not just to have their legal papers that they sign, which are the non-disclosure agreements, but they have a third layer, and you're part of a secret society, and you've sworn never to betray secrets or the oath. So this is why you haven't had a lot of whistleblowers through the ages on Freemasonry, on Scientology. Scientology's not so bad because we do have non-disclosure agreements. I signed one, but I've broken it 1,000 times, and basically it's not really enforceable. It's in conflict with the First Amendment. Okay, so we can't hold up in court.
Even if you're not in America?
No, it would not hold up in court. I'm not sure about other countries, but if they wanted to prosecute me on that basis, they would have to do it in the United States. I would have to be served there. Anyway, a lot of guys have broke their non-disclosures. The guys that are whistleblowers that you hear about, and some of them have been on the Leah Remini show. So it's really not enforceable. It's against the Constitution.
Huh.
So anyway, we were talking about how the secret is maintained, you know, through all these layers of secrecy and
Wow,
these
yeah.
oaths. So
Hmm.
Hubbard was part of naval intelligence. He did do a CIA project in the very beginning with Dianetics. Dianetics was, what can we do if we have soldiers being interrogated and brutalized in North Korea, which was what was going on in 1950 when Dianetics came out and the first foundation. And Hubbard had contracts with the CIA to see, can we deprogram these prisoners who come home using Dianetics. And just so people know, Dianetics derives from the same thing Freudian psychoanalytic therapy does. It's a different branch and it goes very differently.
Huh.
But Dianetics basically traces back to Sigmund Freud's mentor, Joseph Breuer, who around 1980, give or take a few years, I'm sorry, 1880, please, 1880, he had a patient who recovered from her psychosomatic illnesses as a result of going earlier similar down a time track of similar traumatic events with her eyes closed, basically reliving these events. So Dianetics is basically a technique of reliving your experiences and going through them again. And this time, at the time that you lived it, you didn't confront it. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a trauma that's still plaguing you, right?
Huh.
But when you go over it again with the help of another therapist or somebody who's just sitting there with you, who's read the book Dianetics and who's applying this to you, you get to go through it with your eyes closed again, and this time pick up the things that you were not able to confront at that time. And as a result, your unconscious mind releases the material so that you're no longer subject to the programming that the unconscious mind picked up under the duress of trauma. Okay? So it's a vital part of the inner work. Later on, we'll talk, remember to ask me about Scientology element of inner work and how that's different, how it's similar.
Yeah,
But
that's
Dianetics is
interesting.
pretty much straightforward, confronting past incidents that were traumatic for you, childhood, injuries, sports injuries, whatever. Okay, breakups with a girlfriend or boyfriend. All of these things can be run with your eyes closed, rerun so that you actually get through it, because you didn't get through it. And the reason it got pushed into your unconscious mind is because it was too much for you at the time. Okay? It was overwhelming to the nervous system or overwhelming to you as a being to some degree, or you wouldn't have pushed it aside and said, I never want to look at that again. Okay? I don't want a picture of my ex-wife hanging around. I don't want to remember that.
Yeah,
It's
that's
too
like that
much.
shadow work type of stuff.
It's shadow work.
Yeah.
It's an element of shadow work, and I'll go into a different part
And I'm
later.
curious if Carl Jung knew about Dianetics or what he would think about it or that kind of stuff.
Well, he was doing his work before Dianetics, so
Of course, yeah.
Dianetics did derive from some of his, and he took a different approach in a different direction. And again, you'll find that mirrored in a certain level of the Scientology processing. And he basically focused on the games that people play and the identities that they take. And he talked about the archetypes. You're being the king or the queen of this situation, or you're being a victim or a master. So he talked about the roles that people play to get through trauma. Okay. Now, he knew about the Freudian Breuer stuff that I talked about, and he did use it and apply it. But he was really more interested in how that affects our unconscious setup and how we play our game in life as a result of being traumatized. And he was able to take apart some of that trauma from a different angle. Okay. Some of that is in Scientology, but I'm having to put it back there in my free Scientology project because it wasn't very much developed.
Interesting.
For example, there's a book called Games People Play. There was a whole revolution in the 60s and 70s, and it led to books called like I'm Okay, You're Okay. So anybody old enough to remember those days or have seen those books on your parents' shelf, Popular Psychology had a lot of Jungian games type stuff that Scientology only got into to some degree in a different way. So anyway, that's kind of Dianetics in a nutshell. Reliving your past traumas so that they don't bother you anymore. You know, we call it erasure. You're erasing these. You don't, strictly speaking, erase them as far as you don't remember them anymore, but the memory is no longer painful, and it becomes experience instead of trauma.
Cool. I'm glad you clarified that, because some, pertinent shadow workers be like, hey, is there any bypassing going on? Because that shit can stay with you forever. Kind of idea. But yeah, and like just healing the pain. That's the main thing. That why would anyone do the work if you're not healing something in that context, right? So
yeah. So the maxim that you operate off in Dianetics is the way out is the way through. So you do have to go through that, and it's painful and hard to confront. But once you do it, Dianetic style, the way that you relive the perceptions that you had at that time, all of that works together to accomplish erasure or at least alleviation. We're looking for some sort of alleviation of that trauma. And that makes people happier, healthier. So we got a lot of pushback from the American Medical Association when they realized that it was an effective therapy and they would have less patients. I'm not sure whether that has come back to haunt Dianetics and Scientology in the last decades. I suspect yes, but they haven't been able to stop Dianetics and Scientology. So it's a different faction of the ruling class. They of course own the medical industry, and Dianetics is a threat to it. But then they also want their controlled opposition. And so if you pay the money and join the cult, you can do Dianetics with them, and they'll do it right. They'll do it using the electrometer, e-meter, that really zeroes in on the most traumatic incidents and really rapidly gets you out of all your traumas. So within, say, a few dozen hours, as opposed to hundreds of hours doing it the old book way, where you read the Dianetics book. I'm not saying don't do that. It's still worth doing, but it becomes a very technical subject. And when you have a meter that can detect charged areas and you can use that to guide you in, you can handle a lot more efficiently the inner work than you could otherwise. This is why people do mortgage their houses. They get so much trauma handled on their cases that they have remarkable resurgences in life, and they do better in life. They make more money. They get the promotion. You see Tom Cruise go through his acting career. He credits his alleviation therapy in Dianetics in Scientology with helping him become a better actor or helping him to navigate life easier. So, yeah, there is a lot of benefit to it.
Right on, yeah. Thank you. Geez, I keep getting spaced out and thinking like
it's a huge subject, yeah. And it touches on a lot of things that we care about in the freedom, truth, justice movement. How do we get to our inner traumas? How do we use that to see the world more clearly so we have better solutions to the problems in it? How do we get our freedoms? How do we become worthy of our freedoms? All of that is entangled with the inner work, and it's not just, I don't want to promote just Scientology, but whatever inner work you can get your hands on, some of it's better than others. is vital to becoming a better person and a more effective person and enjoying more freedom.
Right on. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
yeah, before we get into the solution side of things and like delving into this, the inner workings and stuff to kind of heal these divides within people, what can you say about, just to clarify again, like how Scientology has been like a dialectic, if you will, how it's kind of put people against each other in a sense, or even like people within groups of Scientology seem to have cut themselves off from like the public in a sense, or don't have that many friends that are not within the organization sometimes. And people, it seems like a almost like a lifelong investment sometimes, and especially people are going to be putting that much money into it. They're almost obligated to, like, hey, you're putting all your chips into this one basket, so you gotta, do that.
Yeah,
So
it makes you chase after your investment. That's part of it. Yeah. But it is to some degree, like I said, there is some value in it. So there's a worthwhile investment there. However, when they're asking you to give up your personal freedom to associate freely with people you want to associate with, that the doors start to shut as you get in deeper into the cult. So there's
they don't tell you that off the bat, do they?
What's that?
Did they tell you that off the bat, or what?
No, of course not.
Oh,
of course,
really?
they'll tell you that you're free to maintain your beliefs that you already have. They tell you you're free to, and in a sense, they're right. And if you really keep those freedoms going personally, you can be a part-time Scientologist and get some things out of it. I have not dissuaded people from going into the church. I told them to be very careful. I've not dissuaded people who, because there are certain actions at the very start of your inner work that are very difficult to do outside the church. For example, the purification program, you have to find a sauna, you have to find people who know what they're doing, you have to get all your vitamins together. It's a do-it-yourself project. Whereas if you walk into the church and you have money, you put it down, you show up, you see, so there's a different approach here. It's very difficult to be an independent Scientologist outside the church. You've got a lot of work that is taken care of when you own the buildings and you have the organization and all the books and everything all ready to go. Okay.
Yeah, it was honestly almost overly impressive with some of the videos that I was kind of rifling through to kind of prepare for this, and not like I'm so focused on all the stuff. I'm really I keep that curiosity and keep a buffer zone away from whatever anyone's saying outside, and just like, hey, I got to see this for myself and have my own opinion first and foremost, and all this stuff. And so, yeah, some of these videos, they're like extremely high quality, really well done. Like the producers that made it, it's like, wow, holy shit. They're like going through the 3D architecture of these, chateau buildings and all this stuff. And they got like these whole big ass facilities of people cranking out umpteen hundred thousands of books per year or whatever. But my last question was more about, we got to cruise back to Tom, because people in the conspiratorial world are almost looking at this thing like porn, with the eyes wide shut, and obviously the occult, imageries and that kind of stuff. Was he even involved with Scientology at the time he was in that Kubrick film, or what?
Yes, he was. In fact, they both were. Nicole Kidman was his wife at the time and also a Scientologist. She left Scientology when she divorced him. So she was in there for a few years. But at the time that they made that film, they were both in Scientology.
Oh, wow.
As people might think there might be some connection, not really, other than Scientologists pride themselves on being able to confront evil, or confront more than the average person. Because they've done their inner work, and they've done the communication drills, which demand that you really confront the other person, and you confront the ability. If you're going to become an auditor, you have to confront insanity to some degree. Okay? So in all the training in Scientology, we pride ourselves on being able to confront some pretty heavy stuff. So when they did that movie with Stanley Kubrick, they probably just thought, oh my God, you know. But if you really go into the backgrounds, I'm not going to rule this out. What I said probably applies, that they just, felt like it was a bigger layer of confront of what really goes on this planet. But there's some indication that Tom Cruise is connected in, maybe this happened later, I don't know, with secret society or intelligence type thing. That's just my speculation. I've seen some indicators of it. But if you go into Nicole Kidman's background and you have read any of the whistleblower materials, Nicole Kidman's father was a prominent Freemason in Australia in the Melbourne area, which is equivalent to Hollywood. Melbourne is the Hollywood of Australia. It's where all the rich and powerful live, and that's where they do the big lockdown, because that is a key city. And there's a lot of Satanism there. Freemasonry is, I can tell from people that I have counseled, Freemasonry is very satanic in that area. I can't say the same all over the world. I've heard of Freemason organizations that are very mild, or that practice what they preach, and they're not involved in dark activities. But in the Australia, and it's particularly Melbourne area, and Nicole Kidman's father was involved in that. These people traffic kids. They're involved in sexual trafficking of kids and sexual abuse of kids. And according to the whistleblower account by Fiona Barnett, Nicole Kidman was very much aware of that activity. She didn't participate from what she witnessed, but aware of that activity and aware that her father was deeply into that activity. So in light of that, the movie Eyes Wide Shut would not have been a surprise at all to Nicole Kidman. It might have been to Tom Cruise, but not Nicole.
Interesting. Wow. So there weren't any real... It wasn't depicting anything about Scientology at all.
No connections to Scientology. I can pretty well assure you of that. Other than... wait a second. Stanley Kubrick's daughter did get involved in Scientology, but according to what we know publicly, because that's all we got, Stanley Kubrick was concerned that she was in the cult, and he was not cool with it. Not completely. So his daughter was in it, and I don't know if she still is, but was in it for quite a while, and he was concerned about it. Other than that, he knew Tom Cruise was in Scientology. He knew Nicole Kidman was. They probably had their talks and realized there was no problem, and they went forward with their project. But I can assure you that there was no other real connection to Scientology, other than, Kubrick's exposing the people that own Scientology, ultimately. So, yes, there is that connection way above on the top that comes down the organization chart in totally two different areas that are not in connection with each other down here.
Yeah, that's interesting, man. Thank you, Scott. That's probably the best, grounded explanation of this. And, I mentioned, the conspiratorial world, and, it's been referenced as, conspiraporn, because people watch these, things and these trivial analysis of things, and it's dramatized to a certain degree, or sensationalized, and they're watching porn, conspiraporn, right? And that's kind of why folks like us get thrown in with the baby with the bathwater with these subjects, unfortunately, when we're just trying to uncover the truths and realize certain things, and we understand these are peripheral things towards the real priorities of having a true sovereign sense of being and eventually a society, right? As we're
Sure, sure. Well, let's talk about the analogy you just made. Kind of a risky area, but nonetheless,
yeah, sure.
you talked about porn, how it's like porn. So, you see a few images of a woman's nude body, and you fall in love with that, and you know, you could go further in one direction, or you could let that stimulate your interest and sort of guide you along, and you ethically navigate that. You become very interested in the opposite sex. We're talking like a teenager here, right? And interested in doing it right, doing it ethically, and not getting involved in the seamier side, that other direction, right? When you talk about conspiracy theory, it is very fascinating, and it opens the door. It actually opens the door to your personal freedom, because conspiracy theory is finding out. It's like finding out how gangs run things and how violent it all is and how people get killed for knowing these things. And it becomes porn if you sit and do nothing about it. It becomes a sort of an interest that eggs you on to learn more, to do more, to fight the forces of evil that are behind the things that you find out in the conspiracy world. Okay? So it's not all a bad thing. But
totally.
I'm glad you made that analogy, because if
Likewise,
it
man.
can be just as bad as the addiction to pornography and go down a route that you don't want to go if you do nothing with it. If that's all you do is, and then you have these YouTubers, and a lot of them are controlled opposition. They're paid and established by the powers that be through these secret lines, and a lot of times they don't even know how they're being used. All they know is they're going to get extra money if they promote this or that, or if they attack this guy over here. Okay? It's all done on a need-to-know, compartmented intelligence basis. Everything is in this world. And that's why they don't get caught or exposed more. It's a wonder that they don't have so much more exposed, because they do try to keep their secrets. And the way they do that is they keep it compartmentalized. And so you have these YouTubers, and they thrive on conspiraporn. They thrive on the people who are addicted to the message, or who are addicted to how bad Bill Gates is. Can we see another pie in Bill Gates' face? Can we see, can we see how Bill Gates is going down because that he's secretly in Guantanamo, and we're torturing now for him now, and he's getting what he deserves. All that thrives on the people who did not get active as a result of learning about what's really going on in this world through conspiracy theory type things.
Yeah, like they're over sedated on the dopamine hits, kind of metaphorically, of guys going out willy nilly, kind of thing like that, if you will, and just lashing out too much of that life force energy, all for what? For nothing, and we're kind of like drained at the end, in a sense. Yeah, I feel you. That was great, man. Scott, thank you so much. And that kind of analogy has been on my mind for a while, and I love the fact you brought up the positive aspects of that, because I've been more, joking around with that in the negative context. But man, I'm glad you found that beautiful balance to that. So, and obviously, it's a testament that you've done your inner work quite a bit. And so to kind of delve into that as we were moving towards to kind of finalize this wonderful chat, man. What are your findings or insights and things that you've gleaned off of through Scientology, that, extracting those nuggets of golden truth and philosophy and all that good psychology?
Well, thank you. I'll try to do that. The first thing we want to emphasize here, I'd like to emphasize, is that what we just talked about, doing something about our freedom fighting for our freedoms, doing something about the state of the world, and maintaining our freedoms and becoming free from the oppression and the system. As we know, those of us who have been in it for a while and have really taken Mark Passio as a great teacher in this area, taking his advice to heart, you can't do that much. And there were slogans even back in the hippie days of the late 60s, the people against the war and the draft, that if you want to change the world, you have to change yourself. So from this, we know from hard-won experience that you're not going to get very far. In other words, revolutions turn to this meet the new boss, same as the old boss, because the people who did the revolution didn't do the inner work, didn't become free themselves. And so they turned from slaves to masters, and now they're just as bad as the old masters. So if we ever hope to change this world or this society, we have to confront that we have to do the inner work in ourselves. And what's the benefit? Not only do we have a easier and better life and happier life, but we become more effective at our outer work. We can reach further. We can endure more and get deeper into the enemy lines and make a bigger impact. So the reason for the inner work is the outer work. And we should never forget that, because you can go the other extreme and get all involved in becoming therapeutic, sitting on the couch, closing your eyes and talking about how bad your life is. That's okay to some degree. You've got to do that to start, okay? But you want to achieve a balance. You want to get some auditing or therapy on the one hand, and then you want to go out and apply it. You want to go out and increase your game, get better at it. In turn, you earn more money and time to go back and do some more inner work. And it's very important to keep that left-right balance going to where you are doing your inner work so that you're more effective at your outer work or your life goal or your job, let's say. Whatever it is that you have to do to survive right now. Okay? So there are different levels of inner work and different ways to get started. I like to start with the one that's least expensive and easiest to do for the beginner. And let's call it, for lack of a better word, journaling. That means getting a notebook and a journal. And some people like to dream journal. I'm not very much into dream analysis or Jungian therapy in that direction. I have a different interest in Jung. But that's something people already do to some degree. And think on this for a minute, if you will. In times past, it was very common for people to have diaries and journals. And that's how we know a lot of our history. Historians have been able to get in. Do you know very many people who keep journals anymore? It's sad. And some of them will keep something of one on a cell phone, maybe, cell phone notes. That's not the same thing. There's an interaction in the body, an inner connection that goes in a circle, in a very healthy circle, that begins to clean up your areas of difficulty by getting it out on paper. And so a journal can be one of the most therapeutic things that you do. Even if you're getting therapy otherwise, you can still journal at night or keep a journal of your life. So it's a message to yourself. It's getting in communication with yourself. And then when you look back on it later, you go, oh, so that's what I was thinking. That's what I was doing. And you can even go back to periods of your life where you were successful and find out how you did it, right? Because you forget how you did it after you get traumatized with failure, right? So it's important to be able to connect with yourself, okay? So I'll give you a kind of a briefing and outline of how the Scientology levels go of inner work. And so the very first thing you want to handle in your life is the practical functions of your life. Do you have your room cleaned up and organized? Do you have a good job that you like, that you love? Is it exchange? Is it right livelihood? So you want to use the Buddhist eight principles, right, of ethical living. I don't remember what they're called, but it's the 8 principles. And one of them is right livelihood. Are you working for a defense contractor, or are you working for, say, teaching kids and helping them prepare for life? Okay, there's a big contrast there. You're working for death, or you're working for life, right? And I know a lot of people are coming into awareness that they need to change, but they're stuck in maybe a order following job, or a job that just is not very ethical, or a corporation that is not. You've got to transition out of that, and the inner work will help you do it. So you got to have a plan, but at the same time, while you're executing your plan, you do as much inner work as you can. So you get all these exchanges going between you and the outside world. How am I exchanging? Am I doing fair exchange? Am I collecting welfare? Or am I being a tax cow and working too hard and paying taxes into the system that I'm not getting any benefit from? You have these two extremes, and you want to make sure you're getting what is yours, not in a selfish way, but your exchanges are cleaner and cleaner, So you're basically at the very bottom level, you're working with ethics, and you want to get out the Buddhist 8 principles, right livelihood, right thoughts, all these things that you need to do.
Right action and all that, yeah.
Right action, thank you. And learn the basic principles of do no harm and defend from harm, which is the masculine. So the feminine is,
Pillars of enlightenment, yeah.
Yeah. So the principles of do no harm, you shouldn't be involved in harmful activity, or in a corporation that's involved in harmful activity, or God forbid, the government. And you should be involved in defending from harm. Men much more than women, because men are inclined that way, they're designed that way, their bodies are different. So you have defend from harm and do no harm as your basic rock bottom ethical principles. So you need to make sure that's happening in your life. So the first thing that you've got to be able to confront is help. Help is your ability to receive help from others, because if you can't receive help, you're not going to get very far in the inner work, because you're going to have to request or get involved with people helping you, and you're going to have to open the door and let people help you, even if you've been betrayed in the past. So it's not hard to do. When you do help processing in free Scientology, there's a lot of easy processes that are easy answers, and processes in free Scientology repeat themselves. And it's the opposite of hypnosis. Hypnosis repeats ideas so that they stick in your mind. Okay? Scientology auditing does the opposite. It repeats questions, not ideas. It repeats questions so that you draw out. It's like the trivia. You're drawing out information from deep inside of you so that you begin to learn to know yourself. And that's the processing. The heart of the trivium is processing. So you're processing the inputs, what's been done to you in the past. Okay? Now you're processing that so that you can have a different outcome. Instead of failing at life, instead of failures, you can begin to succeed because you processed those traumas that say you're no good, that say you're a failure, that are telling you that inner voice is traumatized. Okay? So you want to do help processing basically in the very beginning. You want to also do objectives where you're contacting your environment and your perception of your environment is getting clearer. And you do that by either working, by athletics, or by doing the objectives processes in Scientology. So an example of that is go over to that box. Thank you. Touch that box. Thank you. You're putting the person in contact with their environment. And so you say, let go of that box. Thank you. And they look kind of puzzled, and you go, what's happening? And so they tell you. And so you do another, pick out another object. And that is Scientology objectives, and it's getting the person in contact, because trauma teaches us to withdraw from the world. And we think that's a good thing in some cases. We withdraw in order to study. We retreat in order to recover and rebuild our energy, right? We go to sleep, and that's a withdrawal from life, and that recharges the batteries. But unhealthy withdrawal is when you don't go out and do things that you know you should be doing because either because of fear or because you just don't feel like it, because there's too much trauma has built up, or too many people have been around you so negative that all they do is stir up trauma inside you. Okay? So you want to get the person in contact with your environment and noticing the interactions that we have, the communication. That's next. Help, control of your environment, and communication are the three fundamental steps at the very bottom of. And Scientology is very strong on communication. Hubbard did thoroughly research communication, all of its parts. He even came up with communication exercises or drills that you do for each part so that you become better at it. So Scientology builds better communicators. And that's why the actors love it so much, because acting is fundamentally becoming a better communicator. So those are the three basic.
Yeah, totally. Can I ask you a question real quick?
Stages. Yeah, go ahead.
Going back to actors, and this is the last one about that. Old Tommy, or maybe not, we'll see. But yeah, I think it was that woman, Leah Remini.
Leah Remini?
Maybe on her show or just her being interviewed or whatever. I think she was saying, like, in one of those, and this is what's annoying is to me as well. You see all these YouTube videos of like, oh, like all caps, Tom Cruise destroyed over or exposed or blah blah blah, like all caps, wow, sensationalism. But so in this video, which I'm just looking at it just for objective purposes, just like, all right, what the hell are y'all be talking about? And like, what's the big deal really? Which is she mentioned something like, oh yeah, and like Scientology, following Tom Cruise around, like it's really leading someone to be actually like a very extroverted, and not like you always have to be out in public, and old Tommy wasn't really seeing his family as much as he could have, or blah blah blah, and this and that. But it's just funny how that's like the exoteric side of things, and maybe part of the negative side and blah blah blah. But it's funny and ironic compared to like what you've been talking about with going within oneself and like doing that inner work and staying grounded within that first and foremost, so you can actually be out and more effective in the outer world, in a sense. They kind of left that part out or something over there. I don't know.
That's true. Okay, so let's look at that, because that's a very good question. People who are introverted are usually painfully so, and it's usually a result of trauma. So when you can get communication exercises that help you to reach out and to get through the barriers of shyness and introspection, that's a really good thing. Now, it can be overdone, of course, the other way. Tom Cruise jumping on the couch, that was a little too much communication for most people. I thought it was awesome because I'm really in tune with loving my partner, and I thought I would love to have the courage to jump on a couch and tell the world how much I love my partner. But
Yeah.
think of me as crazy if you want. I know that it came off as crazy to most of the world because I've been told that a million times, right? Both when I was in Scientology and then later when I got out. So that was funny and that was fun. Tom Cruise was having fun. He felt like he could just jump on the couch, and everyone laughed. Anyway, that's the other side of being a little too extroverted for some people. They're not quite ready for that. That's okay. But and it's a little unrealistic when we're struggling with what we are as humanity, that people would be acting like there's nothing to worry about anywhere. So I get it. Scientologists, certain Scientologists have been kind of obnoxious, let's say, in that direction. Okay, but the potential of the subject in learning these communication drills and everything is that you can bring it into a balance. You don't have to be shy when you want to reach out. You have the courage and the ability practiced. You can go and reach out. I tend to be kind of introspected. I may come across introverted on an interview and I'm saying a lot of things. That's not me all the time. But because of the communication work that I've done, I'm able to do it comfortably and enjoy it. But I do a lot of reading and study and introspection myself, okay? So it depends on what's your thing, okay? You don't have to become an extrovert or an introvert. You can kind of merge them together and do what's right for the situation you're in.
Yeah, and it's funny just because that video, it just seems to lead the viewers like, oh, this Scientology thing, they're trying to lead people away from themselves, kind of like a lot of other religions do. And so they're just trying to tie a little gobbledygook possibly and yada yada. But all right, last question on Tommy. What's your overall just opinion about him? Is he getting too much flack thrown at him just because he's like in the public eye and, you know, really famous and all that stuff? Probably most famous celebrity in Scientology, behind Ron Heasy for sure. But yeah, just
before Scientology, I resented Tom Cruise because he represented to me the guy kind of envious. I was a little bit communist. I was in this like, this good-looking short kid that all the girls love. It's like I didn't want anything to do with that. Okay. And to be honest, but when I got into Scientology, number one, I handled the inner work stuff that helps you to get over the stupidity of envying people for their wealth or for their whatever. It's okay with me that people are successful and happy and even wealthy. You know, that's their thing. That's great for them. You know, I can say proudly that my inner work from Scientology has been to get away from this envy. And a lot of people envy Tom Cruise. Okay, number two, I began to admire Tom Cruise while I was in Scientology because I was sort of in the bubble. All I heard was what was presented at the events, the movies that we went and saw. And he's a fairly good actor in some people's opinion. Not everybody shares that opinion. But definitely it looked great for a long time. And then when I got out of Scientology and I went deeper down these rabbit holes, some of them I'd already gone down before, during, and after Scientology. But I went down the Tom Cruise rabbit hole, and I can't vouch for the guy anymore. I'm sorry. But he's been involved in taking advantage of young people in ways that I prefer not to state because it's not firsthand information, but it rings true, and I'm very disappointed. And he's not, to me, a model of Scientology anymore. And even worse is that he became a best friend and enabler, that's an important word, of David Miscavige, the leader of the religion, who is a criminal and has done criminal things. and who has destroyed a lot of the good things in Scientology. That, Hubbard had his dark side, but when David Miscavige took over, he really
Shit got
focused on
darker.
that. Made it worse. Made the
man.
dark side of Scientology even worse. I mean, he cleaned up a little bit of the image, and he took away some of the power of the Guardian's office, the intelligence arm, to do the things that it was doing, which were, frankly, some pretty dirty operations that may have included political murders, according to a whistleblower, Bill Franks, who was way up in the organization. But that was the 70s. Hubbard ordered that stuff to be put
like that
behind
with everyone,
us. Yeah. So, yeah, deep and dark in there, especially when you are modeled after basically a mafia, And it's still that way to some degree. And David Miscavige did do a few good things and cleaned up a few things. But by and large, he's enslaved a lot of people in this cult. He made the cult more of a cult. And, compared to what it is now, they called it a cult in the 70s. Oh, it was, unless you were in the Sea Org, the inner core of the people who sign up for 1 billion years, and are staffing the organization full time, 7 days a week. Anybody else was able to come and go freely. It was not, strictly speaking, a cult like it is now. And people can still come and go freely, but you can't get very far in the organization unless you turn over your cell phone records when asked, and you're not getting on the internet, and you stay in their bubble. You can make it in their organization.
Not coming on podcasts like these.
No. or watching them. You're not supposed to watch Scott Gordon.
Shit, man. Yeah.
Okay, now I can get into the core of what's in your mind.
Yeah, I got 20 minutes. Let's go.
Wrap it up.
I want to just go full speed into. Yeah, because I know these things are like super long, drawn out, man. You're talking about years of, studying and all this stuff, and already what you're trying to do on the side with your projects and websites is to, boil it down to make it more digestible for, other general public consumption, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I've even simplified it from Hubbard's model, which was a little bit complex and overloaded. So even for Scientologists, they're going to recognize in these next 3 grades 1, 2, and 3. And I'm going to talk about, we already talked about the exchange of communication, the exchange of help, and the exchange of perception in the environment with the objective universe and the subjective, which the Mark Passio folks would like a lot, because we talk about how important it is to not be wrapped up in yourself, but to have awareness of the objective environment. And that can be accomplished in the inner work of Scientology in objectives. But we're going to go on to the next stage. What's actually in the mind? Well, the core of the mind is the problem, okay? The problem of life. And if you want to get real philosophical and talk about yourself as an eternal spiritual being, the problem of existence. How do we manage the activities and the survival and taking on a body, one life after the other? How do we manage all that as spiritual beings? That's the problem. That's the core. Okay? So problems are inherently traumatic, but a problem can become more of a problem when you have trauma and confusion surrounding it. So one of the first things that you address when you get into the core of the mind is problems and solutions. Okay? So this is grade 1. And by the way, grade 0 was communication. We already talked about the starting points. Okay? So grade 2, so outside of this inner pole of problems, which are, by the way, are solved by communication. So you have the prior grade helping you to overcome problems. you have two flows from yourself and from yourself and to yourself. The things that have happened to you in your past, we call those traumas. We call those upsets. Okay? And the things that you have done, we call those transgressions. We call those mistakes. We call those, in Scientology, they're called overts because they're overt acts or openly hostile activities against other people. So when we're talking about do no harm, if you've harmed others, you've committed, in Scientology, we call it, you've committed an overt. And the way to fix that is to face up to it, confront it, talk about it, admit that you did it, and give the details, because both of these sides that I'm going to talk about resolve on specific details. Okay? That's very therapeutic. Okay? We call it the time, place, form, and event of what you've done. And that also applies to what's happened to you. Not so much the same exact formula, but when we talk about what's happened to you, where did it happen? Who was it? We ask all the questions to draw out the specifics so that you talk about it and feel better about it. You release it, okay? So the next two grades are mistakes and secrets. We call it overts and withholds in Scientology language, which is addressing the mistakes you've made or the harmful actions you've done. And grade 3, which is what has upset you, what has hit you hard in the face that you had no defense for, what has knocked you silly, what has overwhelmed you. All those things need to be addressed on grade 3. And we call that a life repair. And you take all the overwhelming changes in your life, the things that people did to you, and we look at those. And we actually save that for last. Although, in a session, we take it up first. If you've got an upset with someone, that's the first thing you need to talk about. Then if you've done something to others, your awareness is raised a little bit in being able to get relief from what was done to you. And also you lose the justification. Otherwise, you're going to say, what I did was justified because I've been, I had a bad childhood. That kind of idea, right? Comes up in court all the time. Okay? So we handle the things that were done to you first in a session, and then you become more willing to talk about and to take responsibility for the things you've done to others. Both of these are very big deals to the mind. Because when we do those, we feel guilt, or we feel shame, or we feel crushed, and it really holds us back. So, completely apart from Dianetics, which is mostly what was done to you and talking about the experience, we do these in Scientology as repetitive processes. For example, I may say, recall an upset. And you'll say, yeah, I had an upset with my girlfriend last week. And I'll say, good, thank you. Recall an upset. And you say, yeah, I had an upset with my dad at Thanksgiving. So I get you to recall these over and over, and you start to see a commonality. And it may not be obvious to you, but to your subconscious mind, you'll have a commonality, and you'll have a realization, and you go, oh, wow, I feel better now because I understand these upsets a lot better.
Pattern
I
recognition.
understand why I react the way I do. Right? So the whole maxim, know thyself, which is the essence of inner work, becomes resolved on these 3 levels. And I know since we're running out of time, I'm going to go over the very top levels, because I know people want to know what's at the top of all this. Because in Scientology, you have OT8, the secret level that you get to at the very end. Okay, I'll be very upfront with you. A lot of that was BS. A lot of that was marketing. But there is in theory and in practice, there are some higher levels that once you've handled these the core of the mind, you're open to really having insight into. One of them is games, which we talked about. Carl Jung and his archetypes come in very handy here. You learn to analyze your role in the game and why you fight back and why you take offense and what roles that you're playing, why you're just like your dad. All those things come up in games. That's level 6. And I skipped a level on purpose because it's easier to confront games. Level 5 is confront of evil. You, what's in your heart? Why do you suffer so much at the evil outside in the world? Because we've lived before, we've done bad things, we have evil in our hearts. The Christians said that, and it was kind of unreal because we said, how could you be born evil? No, I'm not saying babies are not innocent and all that. Yes, you are. You should be treated as an innocent human being when you start a new life. However, since we've lived before, these things get activated as we grow up, right? And that's why you see people become more and more evil, even as in their younger years it starts. Because you start activating old programming from other lifetimes. That's what we're addressing on level 5, which is the confront of evil. You've got to confront the evil in yourself to become more effective at dealing with evil in the world. This is the essence. This is probably the most important level to freedom fighters and people who are working in the freedom truth movement. Becoming totally honest with yourself, getting the ability to look far enough within to get at the roots of the evil inside. And Mark Passio does a whole great presentation on the roots of the tree of evil. And the roots of the tree of evil is trauma and self-loathing. And we get into a state of self-loathing when we do things we regret. So we have to confront those things and get through it. Remember I said in Dianetics, the maxim holds true in this auditing as well. The way out is the way through. You've got to confront what you've done, take responsibility for it, and then you can become a more powerful person and move up in the responsibility level. And that's not a pyramid. You're not moving up the pyramid because you killed, three gangsters, rival gangsters, right? You are moving up the true pyramid of power. Or let's not call it a pyramid, but you're moving up the true range of power, level of power
within yourself,
being
right?
able to being yourself and being able to take responsibility for greater and greater areas and greater things. Now, people want to go, well, where do you become more spiritual, or where do you get these abilities like to become psychic and stuff? I'm not going to promise that happens to everybody. Everybody has inherent natural abilities. But when you get to level 7, the second highest level, you work on communication, maybe telepathic, or not everyone's going to have that ability, but if you do, you'll tap into it on level 7. Level 7 is where you get to do you become your thoughts. It's where you start organizing your thoughts and becoming more spiritual and more powerful because your thoughts are in order and they're starting to create effects in the outside universe. This is where the magic starts really happening. But too many people in the new age are jumping to try to do the magic or the law of attraction or the secret, trying to do that when they're loaded with trauma and unconfronted past transgressions and things like that get in the way of manifesting your dreams. Okay? So everybody starts at a different area, but you more or less can revamp your entire existence by going through level by level, step by step, and you can go back around and do it again. It's not that you're at the top of the pyramid and you've got nowhere to go. Now you can handle deeper and deeper issues on each of those levels. And that's about it. If you want to know what the true OT8 is, as I see it, which is an ultimate level, is you become so in tune with yourself that you're able to live with yourself, talk to yourself. You could withstand isolation for long periods of time without going crazy. You're basically in communion with the divine. And that's the true meaning of the 8. The 8 is the infinity symbol, okay? Goes round and round, but in a special way. Every time you go to the middle, you're experiencing life. That's where the plane of cause and effects are, right there at the sweet spot in the middle. And one of these loops is the objective universe, the outer world, and the other loop is going inward, okay? And this happens at a rapid frequency, but there's an infinity within you. And when you really get in touch with that, you're in communion with infinity. You're in communion with the creator or the divine. That's solo auditing. You do the auditing by yourself. You ask yourself the questions. You get honest with yourself at a deep level. And that's where you really become happy with not only yourself, but the universe. You see that there's evil in the universe, but you realize that it's a free will universe. And to some degree or another, there are victims that need help, okay? We should always help people who are victims of evil. Don't get me wrong. But we all see that we've done this to ourselves ultimately. And truly taking responsibility for that condition is the only way out. And then when we help others, we engage that process, that divine process of helping each other out of the trap. And with more knowledge and with more inner knowledge, we become masters. And masters that free the slaves, not masters over the slaves, masters of ourselves. And that's where the real magic happens. And I can't say how long it will take you people to get there. I can't say that I've even arrived there, but I've gotten to certain realizations philosophically that make me very happy and confident that this is fundamentally a good universe. Natural law is there for our benefit, not for our detriment. We can embrace it wholeheartedly because evil was not planned from the beginning. It's not there. Some people say, because they don't quite understand it all, that evil is there to make us grow. Well, it does end up making us grow, okay? That's what it does. We're forced to grow. But that growth process is actually overcoming our own evil inside. And once we get that, evil is no longer necessary and never was and never will be necessary to the optimized universe. And that doesn't mean you're going to convince Darth Vader to become a good guy, within one lifetime even. It means that you can become free and empowered over evil at some point to some degree, okay? There's always gradient scales. Nothing is perfect or nothing is absolute here. But you become a better person and you become more valuable to your friends and relatives and associates in society to the degree that you have this knowledge that you can impart. And then you're a living embodiment of do no harm and prevent harm from happening around your area of sphere of responsibility, okay? And that's about all I can say to whet your appetite. You don't have to do this Dianetics and Scientology, but I can almost assure you that you have to confront each one of these areas because that's what the mind is made of. And we've learned that through hard-won experience. Now, it's been altered, twisted a bit in Scientology. Even the good stuff that we do outside the church isn't perfected or anything. But by these principles that I just outlined, we know we have a philosophical machine, much like the tarot deck that teaches us all the facets of living, right? This is what's in the mind that we need to confront in the inner work of ourselves. And not all of it originated with me. I've drawn most of this out of Scientology, as I've said. Some of it is new. Some of it are ideas and realizations that I had in my own auditing, which was extensive and thorough, really good inner work. I had great experiences. I've got a long way to go in growing up in certain areas. I'm not a master of everything, okay? I don't hold myself out as a model of perfection. All I can say is that I am at the forefront of the movement to bring inner work, effective inner work, to as many people as possible, to the freedom movement and to all the people that will it's almost biblical, you know, the people who will do the work and who will accept the gift will benefit from it. And the people who reject it won't. And that's sad. But what is empowering is to know that the people who do the inner work will not be bullied around and dominated by the evil or the people who refuse to do the inner work. Okay? So I can tell you, I have reality on that as well. So it's worth doing. And it's very hard to get people doing the inner work. Even people who have listened to Mark Passio tell them over and over, you got to do the inner work before you can be effective in the outer work. Before we can change this world, you have to change yourself. And a lot of people are sitting around, but I think a lot of it is they don't know what to do. Mark has given some good tips in some of his presentations of what to do, and they're all very good. You know, they're all good methods of inner work. Psychology has some workable methods, despite the fact that we're enemies, you know, traditionally, Scientology and psychology. I'm trying to breach the gap and to make friends. That's why, you know, Leslie and I had some great conversations about this, about how...
I was bummed she wasn't with us.
How we can bring our tools together and how I can learn from her and her work, and she can learn from maybe a little bit from this. So we have a powerful set of inner work. We're extracting it from a cult. They have held on to it. They have threatened us with copyright and trademark violations. We said, no, you cannot copyright and trademark spiritual work. I'm sorry. This is nonprofit. We're not making money from it. So this is free Scientology, and I'll turn it over to you because my site, freescientology.us, has all the links. That in itself is not the most exciting site yet. I haven't developed it. But on the landing page of freescientology.us, you will find some links to some really cool sites that I have put up there that you can do by yourself if you can't find someone else. You can do it journaling. So I have really worked hard to make it available because in Scientology, pretty much, you had to pay a lot of money to get an expert processor. And it's, for some people, it's worthwhile doing because it, you know, an experienced processor is worth his weight in gold because he gets you through it fast. But still, if you don't have anybody to work with, you really want to get going with the inner work, journaling can do it. And I give lots of processes that you can journal on your own. You can read how processing works. That's a whole other show in itself. And you can make use of my websites, which I will be adding to as much as I can as time goes on.
Cool, yeah. And we'll definitely supply all the links and all your contacts and all that. And are you offering like one-on-one services right now? It kind of sounds like you're teaching this to others already in a sense, you know?
My main mission in life is, at this time, is to help others who are auditing become better auditors and to make more direct training courses for people to learn this fast. I've already got one of the tabs on my freescientology.us already has a tab that is the beginnings of the basic auditor course. And of course, if you want to sneak into the church and get a Dianetics package or go online and search around for one, I recommend you get the Dianetics kits because you can get right into auditing at home if you want. So work with that if you like. If you want to go strictly free and away from the church, totally, use my websites as much as you want. But I hope I've answered the question. Basically, Dianetics is good too. Get a kit if you can, or read the book if you want. The book is heavy and it's long. I'm going to be trying to make it very simplified Dianetics for people to get right at it. But that's kind of into the future a little bit, hopefully this year.
Right on, brother. Yeah, that's great. Looking forward to taking a peek at that. And yeah, any parting words after I say that? Yeah, just for listeners out there, like, yeah, people can be skeptical of a lot of things, but until we kind of like look into these things and for ourselves, and like you said, Scott, earlier, just like, hey, you gotta do the research yourself. Don't believe me or whatever, right? But yeah, but
Well, my parting words would be this: I encourage people to do the inner work, even if you feel like you don't need fixing. You can always improve something. And if you feel like there's no hope, that's not true. Do a little bit at a time, take it easy, do some journaling. You'll find your attitude improves, you're getting better. I encourage you to do that. If the whole idea of Dianetics and Scientology is too much for you, there's other methods. I don't think they're as effective nearly, but emotional freedom technique called EFT for short works pretty good. Jay Parker recommends it. He's one of the he grew up in a satanic family, and he had some heavy trauma to take care of, and it worked very well for him. And I actually recommend that for people who have been involved in satanic ritual abuse. Please look into EFT and do journaling before you do any co-auditing. That's very important. You'll see why when you read Kathy O'Brien's book, Time to Heal, and I have that on my websites, links to her free copy. So I want to say thank you so very much, Leslie and Derek, for having me on and for putting this out there. I think Derek's going to have my websites and links and stuff for you if you want to. I'd love for you to get in touch with me. I'm so easy to find on Facebook because I don't hide any of my personal data. I want people contacting me, whether email's the best way. The second best is if you want to get on Facebook or Telegram. And the third best way, I guess, would be phone. I really prefer email contacts and develop an email exchange. So that's the best way to get in touch with me. Scott at scottgordonmusic.us. And yes, that's my website, music, if you want to sample some of the old stuff, 70s and 80s style, freedom-loving songs.
Yeah, awesome. I'll have to include something in the outro here, but yeah.
Thanks. Oh, that would be great. So yeah, thanks so much for having me on the show and for taking the time to do this, because it's so important to get messages out and to keep holding the torch of freedom high. And I hope that I can make some contribution to that, helping the people who are doing the work. So you asked me earlier if I'm really not taking on clients. I'm open to it, but I've never really promoted taking clients. People find me and they ask for my help, and if I feel like I can help them, I try to work it in. But mainly my work is to repackage this material so that it can be widely used by people and to help to train other auditors. And if I can't help you, I can refer you to somebody who can. So I encourage people to get started, to get involved with it. And thank you so much for having me on the show.
Yeah, really grateful, Scott. And it's been a long time coming. Been friends on Facebook for a couple of years. It's been a pleasure. And I think you're running at least one of Mark Passio's Facebook groups, Natural Law for one, I believe. And keep up the great work.
Natural Law Teachers Support Group, and also I admin for What on Earth is Happening podcast.
I had a feeling that you were on that too. Yeah.
I moderate on Mark Passio's main group. Natural Law, is it called?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. So
simple.
I'm a secondary admin there. So I've been working for a long time, just behind the scenes, helping Mark with that, and very happy to do it. It's become second nature to me. It's like
Gotta love them labors of love, right?
I used to be the watchdog for my local Scientology church. You know,
Oh yeah.
being the Office of Special Affairs meant I was in charge of protecting from attackers and criminals and people who wanted to walk in and cause trouble. So I got really good at that, and so it makes me a natural for being the bouncer for these groups because discussions get very lively, and some people haven't done enough inner work really to accept some of these new ideas. So
Yeah.
you do the best you can, and we hope they come back. You know, after getting a little more maturity and inner work.
Yeah, totally. And yeah, there's so much to just like the truth seeking path, and like really we have to walk that path within ourselves so much to really control our emotions and what we react to and this and that. And if we're not examining what we're getting all knee jerky about, then that's just gonna possibly like wreak havoc in the future. And so we really have to maintain that inner sovereignty and do the great work and work on that inner content before we can like have that proper outer content to share with the world type of thing. So yeah, man. Love the messages and the positive vibes and just like breaking things down for us today. And just hope to just have these cool connections with you in the future, brother. And hope to collaborate again sometime, my friend.
Thank you so much for doing the work. Thank you.
Yeah, you too, man. And thanks to everyone for working through listening to this. It might have been difficult if you're not new to this stuff, and it might be a taboo topic, but hey, we got to cover everything, you know. Can't leave any rock unturned or whatever kind of proverbial cliche you want to throw in there, but yeah. This has been Dissolving the Divide once again, my friends, and we'll see you again next time. Peace.
But the dirty city lights, machinery